Using a tripod. When choosing a tripod, there are some basic considerations. The type of camera that you're using. We'll generally be using fairly lightweight digital SLRs during this module, and for the type of work that we're doing, they can be kept stable using a fairly lightweight tripod. These are also easier for us to carry around. Heavier weight cameras will generally need a more sturdy heavyweight tripod. The type of ground that you're working on needs also to be considered. If you're working on an uneven surface, such as an archaeological dig, you may require a slightly heavier tripod to keep your camera steady. A built-in spirit level is also useful in these conditions to help you level the camera. When working outdoors, weather conditions are also need to be considered. If you're in quite windy conditions, this can move your camera enough to make your images slightly out of focus, and a heavier weight tripod will be useful in these conditions. Here we can see the legs being extended on one of the lightweight tripods that we'll be using. As you can see, the legs are unlocked, pulled to their fullest extent and locked again. This is an example of a heavyweight tripod. This would generally be used for a large format camera or a television camera. The type of tripod that we'll be using during the module is generally referred to as a pan tilt head tripod. It allows independent movement of the camera from left to right, on a rotation and front to back. Other types of tripod are a ball head tripod, which is generally used for video work, as it allows smooth panning of the camera when using a video camera. This type of camera support is referred to as a monopod. It's only got one leg and would generally be used by sports photographers to support long lenses. Once the tripod legs are fully extended, you can pull all three of them out to their fullest extent and place the tripod firmly on the ground. Then the plate can be removed from the tripod head. This needs to be securely screwed with a screwdriver into the bottom of the camera. The camera and plate can then be easily replaced onto the head of the tripod. Make sure that it's secure before letting go of the camera. One of the major reasons for using a tripod is that it allows us to use slower shutter speeds without camera shake. For hand holding a camera, a general rule of thumb is that a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second or faster is necessary to stop your images being blurred. Having said this, this will change with different focal length lenses. To estimate for different focal length lenses when a handheld photograph can be taken, we use something called the 1/focal length rule. For example, when using a 100mm focal length lens on a 35mm camera, to ensure the image is sharp, the shutter speed needs to be 1/100th of a second or faster when you're taking a handheld picture. Keep in mind that this rule is just for rough guidance. The exact camera shutter speed where camera shake takes effect of your images will depend on how steadily you can hold the camera the sharpness of your lens, the resolution of your camera, and the distance to your subject. There are other reasons to use a tripod. You may want to use a more optimal combination of aperture, ISO and shutter speed. For example, you could use a smaller aperture in order to achieve more depth of field, or a lower ISO in order to reduce image noise. Both would require a longer shutter speed, which may mean the photo is no longer able to be taken with a handheld camera. Another reason for using a tripod may be if you're taking a series of images that you want to turn into a digital panorama. In this situation, a tripod is useful to get a consistency of shots. It's also useful to have a tripod whenever you want to precisely control your composition, or if you want to set up your composition in advance of a particular event. Things to be aware of when using a tripod. If you're using a long exposure, it's a good idea to use the timer delay function or a cable release to avoid moving the camera when you press the shutter. When using shutter speeds between 1/4 second and 2 seconds on a 35mm camera, the movement of the mirror inside the camera can also cause vibration and cause your images to look blurred. Most cameras have a way of putting the mirror up prior to taking the shot. On the Pentax cameras that we'll be using, in order to set the self-timer or the mirror up function, you use the 4-way controller on the back of the camera and you press the top button which has the timer symbol on it. The screen that appears on the back of the camera will give you a 2-second timer option. Alternatively, if you're using the mirror up mode, there's an M up option at the end of the same menu. During the practical in week 2, we'll also take some different focal length lenses out with us and take some images to see the effect that these lenses have. The focal length of a lens determines its angle of view and also how much the subject will be magnified for a given photographic position. Wide-angle lenses have a short focal length, as shown in the diagram on this slide. You can see that the short focal length causes the angle of view to be wider. A long focal length gives us a narrow angle of view, as shown on this diagram. Focal length gives the impression of affecting perspective. Wide-angle lenses exaggerate perspective and telephoto lenses compress perspective. This can be particularly useful in architectural photography when photographing a large building or monument, when if you look up at something very tall you tend to get converging perspective, which can be partially corrected by using a long focal length lens.